Good afternoon YouTube and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be teaching you guys a very basic bike maintenance routine. It's no lie that the winter conditions are really tough on your bike mechanically, and this little routine is ideal whether you're an expert rider or you're a beginner and just got your first bike for Christmas. To begin this maintenance routine, we are going to give the bike a clean because it is absolutely no fun at all working on a bike that's covered in mud. I don't have any fancy cleaning products myself. I just use washing up liquid. I've used it for years and I've never had any problems with disc brake contaminations or anything like that. One thing you should never use is pressure washers. They are an absolute no-no because they just wash all the grease out your bearings. Even with a hose, be a bit careful. Don't directly spray bearings because again you're just going to wash grease out and cause damage. Other things to be mindful of: brushes. You want a stiff wire brush if you're going to clean your sprockets or chain, and if you haven't got a proper chain cleaner. Just be mindful, any brush that gets really dirty or greasy like the wire one, don't use that on the disc brakes. Get small brushes like toothbrushes so you can get right in the linkages and the small gaps. Take your wheels out, don't be afraid, get in there, get stuck in. One thing I like to do afterwards before working on it is I've got an airline, so I like to go over, I like to blast all the water out. Again, not directly spraying bearings, just from a distance. It just dries everything out. Any excess water, it stops it sitting there, keeps your bike nice and dry, avoids things rusting, especially the inside of bolts, because I hate it when the inside of bolts are rusty. Today, whilst my wheels are out, I'm going to be going into a bit more depth, and I'm actually going to take the sprockets off the cassette and give them a good clean, because I've been riding in some real thick mud. I've been in the river, so I just want to give that good clean out, because otherwise the mud's going to sit there and that's going to affect shifting. Your bike's all clean, you've dried it off, it's not going to go rusty, it's ready to be worked on. Before you do anything, I always like to check my bike over. Check it for cracks, check it for dents. If you've had any hard impacts, a hard landing or anything like that stands out, check the area of the bike that might have been affected from that, because the last thing you want to do is get out on the trail and have a bike component fail on you just because you've not checked it over. It's so simple, but could save a lot of damage. Time to get the wheels back in. A little tip for you with the rear wheel when taking it on and off: make sure that you're in the highest gear, so the smallest sprocket, because it makes it easier. It means the derailleur doesn't get caught. Sometimes rear wheels can be a bit of a bugger and people get frustrated and start jamming them. Just make sure it's in the smallest gear, because that would be so simple. Once your wheels are in, you tighten them back up. We're going to check the brakes. If you're getting a lot of pull on the lever, it's coming close to the bar, it might be squashing your knuckles. I personally don't like that, so it means your brakes might need a bit of a bleed up or just a top up with fluid. However, that's quite time consuming, and if you haven't got time to do that, what I do often is unbolt the caliper, remove it from the disc, and then using your eye, pump the lever and the pads will move in. When they move into about the width of the disc, like I say, just using your eye, leave it at that, put it back on with the bolts loose, and then you're going to spin the wheel, pull the brake, hold the brake on, and then very gently and evenly do the bolts up. Check that, because the disc might rub a bit as you move the pads in, but what that's going to do is stop the pistons pulling in so far, so it'll give you more feel through the lever. Alternatively, if you're happy with the way your brakes feel and the discs are just rubbing, you can use the same method to prevent the rubbing. The next thing we're going to be checking is your tyres and your suspension. Your tyres are very important because they're the only contact between you and the ground. Go over them, check them for damage, check them for wear, because if it's got either of these, then it could affect your grip depending on what conditions you're riding in. The other thing it's going to do is if they're damaged or worn out, then it's going to increase your chances of getting punctures. Check the pressures, think about what you're going to be riding next, adjust them to what you like or what's going to suit that type of riding best. And if you're running press the valves, a little tip: check that little bolt that tightens it to the rim is tight, because I had a horrible rattle coming from my bike and I couldn't work out what it was. Turned out that was just loose. As for your suspension, if you're running an air fork or air shock, check the pressure, check it's how you like it. Also check that your high speed compression, your low speed compression, your rebound, preload, everything's set up how you like it, because if it's damaged that could have changed, or you might have knocked it and changed one of the dials whilst cleaning it. Check your seals for damage, check the stanchions for any damage, because if these areas are damaged and they need attending to, think about what type of riding you're going to be doing next. Say for example you've been riding jumps on your bike, then your suspension might have been set up stiffer as opposed to if you was riding downhill. So just think ahead a little bit and you can do all them adjustments now rather than when you get on the trail. One of the most important things that we're going to do is check that all your bolts are tight, because as you're riding, things work their way loose. Start at the front of your bike, work your way back. Try not to over tighten things, because that just causes damage and it can round heads, get bolts stuck. If it's something like the faceplate of your stem which holds the bars on, if that's over tightened, then it can cause a crack, which is obviously not good in any circumstances. Things like your headset, if you're going to tighten that, remember, undo the pinch bolts on the stem first and then adjust it very gently and slowly with the top cap bolt, and then once you're done, put your bars back straight again and tighten your stem up. The longer you have a bike and the more you ride it and look after it, then you'll notice that there's certain little things each bike has. For example, mine with this one, no matter how much I try and put Loctite on, where the linkage of the frame meets the rear shock and attaches it, it always comes loose. I've Loctited it, it just every now and again will shake itself loose. So I know every time I service it to just check that that's tight, because you don't want that coming undone. Now that everything's tightened correctly, we're going to go through and check all your bearings. Once again, start at the front of the bike, work your way back, and things we're going to be checking are your wheels, your bottom bracket, your headset, and if you're riding a full suspension bike, check the linkages. Any point there's a bearing, just give it a wobble, give it a rattle. Things that we are not looking for or that aren't good. If you notice a rumbling or a very rough, loud sound coming from a bearing, that's a bad sign. If you notice any sort of play or movement, that's also a bad sign. Lastly, if the bearing's really stiff or seized or very difficult to move, then what you're going to need to do is take the bearing out. It might need replacing depending on the extent of the damage. However, you could try giving it a clean and then packing it with grease. You might be thinking, why did we go through and check all the bolts were tight and tighten everything correctly if we're going to take it back apart again? Well, the reason for that is because until things are tightened correctly, you can't get a true indication of what condition the bearing is in. For example, if your cranks were loose, it's no good trying to detect play in the bearing if the whole system's moving. So you need to tighten it correctly, and then you sort of go, oh yeah, that's the bearing, because the crank's tightened sufficiently. Gears are forever going wrong because they're just a cable system and things stretch, there's a lot to go wrong. But it's pretty simple to keep it all in working order. First thing you're going to want to do is check your system for damages. Check that the derailleur cage isn't bent, check there's no damage on the chain, check there's no wear or damage on the sprockets. Next thing, check that it's all clean. Give your sprockets a good clean like I did earlier. There was a lot of mud on there, that's going to affect shifting. I bought this chain cleaner recently, so I'm going to give it a whirl with that. That keeps it nice and clean, lube it up, keeps it all lubricated. A happy chain is an oiled chain, as they say. Once you've done that, it's all clean and lubed up. Run it through the gears, find out where the problem is if there's a problem. Like I say, just from giving it a clean, that might have fixed any issues that you was having shifting while you was riding. If you're still having problems, then your gears are going to need indexing, which is pretty simple. The first thing that you're going to do whilst indexing your gears is put it in the highest gear on the back, so the smallest sprocket. Then you're going to wind the barrel adjuster the whole way in, that's on the shifter, and on the cable and the derailleur you're going to undo that, so there's no cable tension whatsoever. Then you need to adjust your high and your low screws, so we'll do the low one first. Push with your thumb the derailleur over and pedal the bike so it goes up into the lowest gear of the bike, and when it's sitting on that sprocket perfectly, then you adjust the low screw so that it won't go any further, because like I said, this is what's going to stop the derailleur going over into the rear wheel and causing all sorts of damage. It's then time to go back down, so just let go of it with your thumb, that'll pull the derailleur back across and it's going to fall into the highest gear. Do the same with that, adjust the high screw so that it sits in that perfectly, because like I say, again, that's what's going to stop it going over and getting caught between the frame. Once you've done that, simply just pull your cable through so it's tight. Don't hang off of it or pull it really tight, it just needs to be tight. Then do that up, come up to your barrel adjuster and then give it a go, see what happens. Try go through the gears. If it doesn't go, then you need to tighten the barrel adjuster, so wind it out and that'll put tension in the cable. And then if it's not coming back down through the gears, then you need to wind it back in. It's just a case of playing between them two adjustments on the barrel adjuster. Sometimes the adjustments can be really small, bit of trial and error, takes a bit of getting used to, sounds very confusing. I mean, I'm getting confused just talking about it, but give it a go because it's not as scary as it sounds. And there we have it. That is a quick maintenance routine that keeps your bike nice and dialed. You know, before you go out on it, give it a test ride out the front of your house, make sure it feels dialed, experience how it feels, because you know, going from being all muddy and clogged up to nice and dialed is a good feeling. If you didn't adjust things like your brake levers or your bars when you tightened everything up, then go through and do that again now while it's on the ground. Check things like your dropper or seat post and that's working, and yeah, it's ready to go. So get out on your bike and have some fun. That is the end of this video. I hope that you've taken something from it or found it helpful. I am by no means at all a professional bike mechanic. This is just a routine that I've done on my bikes for years and it's never failed me, so I thought I'd share it with you guys. Some of you more experienced mechanics out there that may have watched this might be looking at it thinking, why is he doing it like that? So if you are one of them people, please put it in the comments, because I could do with learning, and I'm sure the other people that don't know, that read the comments, could also do with learning. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it, give us a thumbs up if you want more maintenance videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.